answer period as well. So, Ms. Hendricks, you have up to 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to join you today. My name is Justine Hendricks, and I am the President and CEO of Farm Credit Canada, or FCC. FCC is a federal crown corporation headquartered in Regina. We serve Canada's agriculture and agri-food industry for the past more than 50 years now. With a loan portfolio of more than $47 billion, we support 102,000 customers through more than 2,300 employees and 103 offices across the country. Our customer service center received more than 42,500 calls in 2023-24, of which 4,134 were in French. So this afternoon, I'll be very happy to talk to you about our organization. So I'd like to discuss FCC's bilingualism and hiring processes as they relate to the Official Languages Act, to provide an overview of our progress and outline our future direction. FCC is committed to promoting bilingualism and official languages, and as a Crown Corporation, we have a responsibility to demonstrate leadership in this area. We use the Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages Maturity Model as a guide within the organization. In 2021, the FCC completed an organizational assessment against this maturity model, which resulted in a 3-year strategy to increase bilingualism throughout the organization. The pillars of this strategy are attracting and developing bilingual talent, embedding bilingualism in the workplace, and leading by example. As part of this strategy, the FCC made several process improvements to refine its hiring practices for bilingual positions. The hybrid work environment resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic has encouraged nationwide job searches, enabling us to find the right talent with the right experience to fill bilingual positions. Hiring bilingual candidates remains a challenge, hence the importance of a robust in-house training program.
Of the positions at FCC are designated bilingual. FCC uses the Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages tool for linguistic identification of positions to guide language designation of key positions. Currently, 80% of our executive management team are designated bilingual positions, and of those, 75% meet bilingual requirements, and another 12.5% are taking second language training. And among our employees who serve the public, 38% are bilingual. Depuis 2021, le nombre d'employés.
Since 2021, the number of employees enrolled in French language training has quadrupled, and I'm happy to report that the FCC's English-speaking senior managers are increasingly interested in this training. 47% of employees taking French language training are in management positions. Of these, 58% are at a beginner level, demonstrating the renewed interest in learning the French language. This year in particular, we have noticed a noticeable change throughout the organization. I also hold the title of the FCC's Official Languages Champion and make it a priority to use both official languages in meetings and communications. So our translation team has been very, very busy.
We had the pleasure of sharing some of FCC's initiatives at the Official Languages Best Practice Forum in Ottawa this year, including FCC's bilingual meeting strategy and bilingual circle coaching initiative. In 23-24, with the intention of finding practical tools that encourage bilingualism, we added a new technology called Kudo to allow simultaneous interpretation in Microsoft Teams. As a result, our official languages team supported over 40 bilingual meetings, including 3 all-time employee town halls. Multilingual teams participating together is an important contribution to our diversity and inclusion. We also saw 13 leaders participate in bilingual coaching circles, accompanied by a language coach and a bilingual HR business partner. These circles exist to increase oral fluency and linguistic security in on-the-job use of second language. En raison de ce changement de visibilité, nous constatons une sensibilisation accrue et un...
As a result of this change in visibility, we're seeing increased awareness and a desire to engage. And we're seeing French-speaking employees feeling more comfortable communicating in their first language. We also have seen that English-speaking employees are increasingly venturing to communicate in French. They use it more often and make presentations in their second language. It is, of course, a journey, and there's more to come. And also, as a Francophone, this journey is of personal importance to me. And I am proud of the FCC's efforts over the past 3 years to increase bilingualism within the organization. Thank you for your time this afternoon, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you, Ms. Hendricks. Within the time and a lot faster, in fact. Ms. Casey, you have the floor for the next 5 minutes. Go ahead. Hello. I would like to first of all thank the committee for its invitation to appear today. My name is Angela Cassie, and I'm the president of the SFM, the Société de la Francophonie Manitobaine. I'm also a former civil servant in the federal public service. As you know, the SFM is the voice of the French-speaking community in Manitoba in all of its diversity. I would like to share a few ideas with you on two major themes. The first one will be the impact of unilingual senior officials on official language minority communities. And the second theme I will talk about is going to be around finding structuring solutions to promote official bilingualism. So this issue is of paramount importance to our community. The bilingual capacity of senior public servants is not only a question of the spoken language at the highest levels of government, but also it is a question of understanding the unique issues our communities face on a daily basis. This has a real impact on decision-making, including the funding of organizations that support our communities and the provision of vital public services, among others. All too often, unconscious biases violate the rights and interests of Francophones, and taken together, these biases create a culture of laxity and indifference to our needs. We're also seeing this with the RCMP. As an example, the RCMP cannot meet its obligations when it comes to bilingualism, despite the essential service it provides. We also find it very worrying that managers can make decisions on language requirements for positions without consulting or simply ignoring the advice of staff specializing in official languages issues. Our Francophone communities deserve robust processes to ensure that they are representative of the Canadian population and that they are treated fairly and equitably. It goes without saying that the SFM supports the recommendations put forward by the Commissioner of Official Languages to tackle the root causes of the problem. This includes structuring investments in our French education continuums in order to strengthen Francophone labor pools. This also includes training for managers to clarify the intent of Section 91 of the Official Languages Act, as underlined by Commissioner Taberge during his address to this committee a few weeks ago. By 2024, the compliance-only approach must become a thing of the past. We need a values-based approach, a public service that is proud and capable of offering service of equal quality in both official languages of the country. And we need public servants, and we need to be able to deliver these services, and we need ways to attract, recruit, and train a greater number of bilingual senior civil servants. So I'll stop there. Thank you for your attention, and the opportunity to present our perspective today, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you, Ms. Casey. So how we will proceed for the first round is that each political group will have 6 minutes of question and answer time, and it will be interactive. And we start with the Conservatives, so it will be Mr. Dalton for the next 6 minutes from the Canadian West. You have the floor. Thank you. I'd like to thank our witnesses as well for sharing their opinion and for their opening remarks. So, Ms. Hendricks, how are the executives distributed amongst, within your organization, within Farm Credit Canada? Are they across the country, or do they live in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and other provinces and parts of the country? Thank you for the question. So the FCC's executives and employees, so we have 103 branches across the country, and depending on the regions, we will have different levels of concentration. Around half of our staff, 2,500 or so, is in Regina, and the rest is throughout the country. And among these employees, as you mentioned, there are executives. So we've seen in the past that client-facing jobs were, for the most part, in different parts of the country. And you might already know this, but because the FCC is focused on the agricultural and agri-food industries, we're often located close to or in rural communities, and that's where we have our staff. With COVID-19, this structure also allowed us to implement a more efficient hybrid working structure, and we've been able to reach out to members of staff or employees who are in other places other than Regina. But in recent years, we've seen a trend that's changed. But we've been able to attract talent from elsewhere when this talent previously was not available always locally. So thank you for your answer. The Treasury Board, are they the ones who provide the guidelines for the linguistic training, language training of your staff? Well, we have certain policies within the FCC, and we also base our actions on the national framework when we're trying to decide what kind of systems we will implement, what kind of training we will introduce, and we're also using tools that are provided by the Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages. Well, I can see that you are making a great effort. So when it comes to French competency, I mean, it's easy to lose it. So do you have a continuous system of trainings in place? Are the employees or executives required to follow a certain curriculum? How does it function? Well, it depends if a position is identified as bilingual, as being bilingual or not. When we are hiring for positions, there will be some positions which will be marked as bilingual, and especially executives or managers in these positions will have to improve their French competency, oral or written. This might be an online course or a tutor or concentrated training where someone goes somewhere for a couple of months for French immersion to accelerate their learning of the French language. So we will implement different methods depending on the case, but we will start out by working on our client-facing, customer-facing employees, especially the Francophone clients of ours. Over the past certain number of years, we've always taken this into account. We're trying to decide if a position is supposed to be bilingual. If so, then there's more detail available as to the hiring process and when we assess different candidates. So the tools that you're using, the resources you're using, have you created these yourself, or where do you find these resources?
Are you talking about resources to support employees? The resources you need to develop training. We have some teachers in-house. We also have immersion programs. When we do that in partnership with external partners. But seeing FCC is a Crown corporation, we do not use services from the Federal Public Service. So we either have online resources, in-house teachers, and also external partnerships depending on the needs of the candidates. And we've also said that we are part of a forum for best practices. An employee who has dyslexia, for example, will need private services that we seek to help the person learn the language. Thank you. Ms. Casey, does the Francophone community in Manitoba, is this a growing community? Is it a community that has grown over time? How does it work there? Because we are talking about the language legacy there with places like Boniface and elsewhere. Are we winning the battle? It's still a battle. Thank you very much for that question. But we are working very hard to ensure the sustainability of our community. I would say that we are seeing growth today thanks to immigration, so that is very important for us. We have several bilingual municipalities. We have a Francophone school district, the St. Boniface University. So it's not just a historic community, but a very dynamic and lively community. Go ahead quickly, very quickly. We have many people who take part in the immersion program that contributes to the vitality of the current community. Thank you very much. Next question. Ms. Annie Kudrakis, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you and welcome to our witnesses. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. My first question goes to Ms. Hendricks. You mentioned that 75% of your employees are bilingual at the moment, if I understood you well, and 12.5% are taking second language courses. What are you doing for the 12.5% of the other employees remaining? Thank you. What I stated was that 80% of our executives are holding our positions that are designated as bilingual. 75% have met the bilingualism criteria, and 12.5% are taking courses. So we are talking about FCC as a whole. It's 14% of our positions are designated as bilingual. What is your organization's plan to provide opportunities for the others to become bilingual? As I said earlier, we have a budget allocated every year, and there are several options for employees who are interested in learning French as a second language. Conversely, we are giving priority to bilingual positions designated as bilingual for those criteria to be met. When there's a choice to be made, and taking into account the capacity we have in-house, that's where we pay attention. Conversely, employees can access online resources. There are other opportunities to allow them to practice French. And we also want to make employees... The interpreter would like to state that there are interferences on the line that are interfering with interpretation.
De candidats bilingues et unilingues.
We try to make sure that everybody can follow the meeting together and to get the information in the language that they understand best. Question: how should the government manage the language competency needs in regions that serve a language majority, for example? Should you have the same obligations for all provinces in all regions at the same level? Or do we need to find the specific needs of each region? I would like to hear your opinion and also listen to Ms. Casey. Thank you. As you know, my role is not necessarily to present my opinion on the matter. What I can tell you here is that, of course, when an organization is making an effort and is putting forward budgets, unilingual Anglophones are able to learn French. So that's the approach that the FCC is taking to meet the needs. But first of all, we want to make sure that in the regions of all provinces in Canada with Francophone communities, we want to be able to serve those communities as well. And there are approaches and tools that we could adopt. For example, we have 2 call centers, one in the Atlantic and one in West Canada. And these 2 call centers are working together. We have more Francophone resources in the Atlantic than in the West, but the 2 call centers are working together to make sure that for all Francophone calls that are received could have someone able to answer, irrespective of where the person is located. So that's the approach we are using to meet the demands and meet the needs of our clients. Ms. Casey, anything to add? Those language rights are fundamental for us, irrespective of your location, and the capacity to access federal services in 2 official languages is a right. So, of course, we are working hard to identify bilingual municipalities, to identify opportunities where we can offer more services. But this has to do with fundamental rights. And the fact that people can work virtually in hybrid mode, that has helped. Are you able to share with us some data when you compare what obtained before and the fact that people are working from home now? We could share that information with the committee, some of the data we have. Before, I think we've all experienced that. It's a challenge for organizations to see how hybrid work could be as efficient as non-hybrid work. But what we saw with COVID was that some positions that we were initially designated as being Regina positions, well, we were able to carry out an experience and have people who were not necessarily based in Regina. And now, today, we are able to allow people work from elsewhere other than Regina. But I'll be willing to share some of the data with the committee. Thank you very much. I think everyone here will appreciate the data. Please send us the information when you have time through our clerk, and that information will be shared with all members of the committee. Thank you, Ms. Kudrakis. For the Bloc Québécois, the second vice chair of the committee, Mr. Bolio. You have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. First of all, I have a question when it comes to a question for FCC Canada. You said 90% of your executive positions are bilingual positions. How many positions are we talking about in terms of numbers? Furthermore, how do you define knowledge of French? What is the level of knowledge required? Well, let me let you answer. I'll come up with other questions. I talked about 80%, not 90%. So maybe I wasn't clear. Sorry, I wrote down 80%. That's okay. We'll play around with the 10%. Talking about executives, I'm talking about division heads. There are 9, including myself, as DJs, and the CEO. What else? How do you define bilingual? Because we are talking of knowledge of French here. Is there a level of knowledge that is required? If someone doesn't know French, do you accept unilingual employees and while asking them to take training? I'll answer the question in 2 parts. First of all, over the past 3 years, things have evolved a bit. If you look at the team of senior executives, 5 years ago, the percentage was a lot lower. For us to accept a position designated as bilingual with candidates who are not bilingual, that will be an exception. At the time the job offer is given, there is a request made that the candidate take French language courses. But for us to get to that exception, we need to have tried to fill the position at least twice to find out if we could have there's talent. And when I talk about talent, I'm talking about talent outside Regina. As I told your colleagues before, things have changed over the last 3 years. Before, those positions would have been located only in Regina, and that was also cause for concern. Is that because you are based only in Regina or you are elsewhere in Canada? The headquarters of FCC is in Regina. There are about 1,000 employees working in Regina. Is the primary employer in Regina, but we have others in other offices elsewhere in Canada. When you talk about the fact that about 14% of the positions are bilingual and 20% of them, and there are 20% francophones in Canada, could that number not be higher? As I said before, there's still progress to be made. We have a 3-year plan. But when I talk about 14%, I'm talking about positions designated bilingual. These are client-facing positions. We have interactions with our clients. To give you an idea, if you take Quebec, for example, we have an 18% market share. And we have a contingency that is able to meet the criteria. So our approach is that we designate positions so that when we are dealing with our clients and partners in Francophone communities, we want to make sure that they can have access to services in French. Let me make a comment. If you are only focusing on client-facing positions for bilingual positions, it means that the working language is English. Answer, not necessarily. As I said, with the application that we use, Kudo, and with the correspondences we have most of the correspondences that get to my office are bilingual. Is that some kind of a software? I have a very busy translation team. I know there are also softwares that exist, but our team members are supported by those softwares. Most of our executives are bilingual, and when we have meetings, they are bilingual. So what is the proportion of bilingual positions? I could send this exact statistics to you, but it's about 75%. The positions that require the knowledge of English, no French. Very well. So 25% of bilingual positions. But I would like to give you statistics. I'll send the exact numbers to the committee. Question. In your office in Quebec, is the working language or common language French? Because we've seen employees of the Federal Public Service in Quebec saying that a lot of work was being done in English. So I'm presuming that everything happens in English first. Well, since I've been there for a year now, when I go to offices in Quebec, when we have meetings with clients, we have our board of directors meeting in Quebec that was held there. Most of the meetings and interactions were in French. I'm talking about the working language. I'm not talking about clients. A lot of the work is with our clients, for example. Oral correspondences are mostly in French. People have to be able to speak and write French. So the common language when we are in Quebec is French. Well, we'll be expecting the data you send, but it's definitely better than what we've seen at CN and elsewhere. Do you have bilingualism bonuses? No, we do not have bilingualism bonuses at FCC. Now, for the senior executives, Ms. Abolio, your time is up. Thank you very much. Well, I let Mr. Dalton go to ensure some fairness. So now, for the NDP, Ms. Ashton, we may have to do a small sound test first. Ms. Ashton. Good afternoon. I hope you're hearing me well. I hope the sound is good. I'm connected. I'm using all the right equipment. Thank you very much. Thank you, witnesses who have come here today. I'm delighted to see Ms. Casey and the Franco-Manitoban Society here, not only because you are doing very important work in Manitoba, but you talked of the fact that the community is growing, and this growth is dependent on Francophone newcomers coming from all over the world. Of course, as you know, our committee has worked on immigration a lot. And there are needs that we need to address within the federal government, within government or federal services and in ways in which we can support French language services in our communities. Everyone, including newcomers who sometimes don't speak English or sometimes do not speak it well. I would like to ask, in your opinion, considering the context and acknowledging the specific needs of Francophone newcomers to Manitoba, do you think that the federal government could do more, invest more to make sure that services are offered in the bilingual languages, be it when it comes to accommodation, housing, employment services? Please share your thoughts with us. First of all, I would not really like to talk too much about the growth because there's still work that we need to do. We need people that are not able to access those services and are turning towards English language first services. And we also have people who come in without speaking French nor English. We have an organization called Accueil Francophone, which is doing a lot to help receive newcomers from all over the world, particularly Francophone newcomers and refugees, but they work with everyone. We have Francophones coming and they have to deal with the reality, but now many of them have to send their children to the immersion schools. So this shows that if they are received in the French language, it helps them and they understand that the only option is not turning towards English. So we have those services. We are talking a lot about investments that we need in our French language continuum to enhance the Francophone labor pool. This means that when people work, they need childcare services. Francophone childcare centers are very important. So we're talking about investments in arts, culture, justice, health, and so on. And that is when we can really talk about living in French. It's not all about a transactional exchange with someone. It's all about being fulfilled in all aspects of our life. But from time to time, with these Francophone immigrants, we have noticed that they have difficulty accessing bilingual positions. Maybe they are Francophones, but their English is not good enough to allow them to get jobs. So let me come back to the question of senior civil servants. It takes people who understand the language, but also understand the importance of those programs to help us build those bridges to make sure that those services continue being offered. So for now, I'll stop there.
Merci beaucoup et j'apprécie.
Thank you very much, and I greatly appreciate that you raised the issue of the continuum of education. I've talked about that on many occasions, the shortage of workers in education in French language, early childhood education centers in Manitoba. We can't talk about a vision to make our public service more Francophone if we don't find solutions to that and be able to educate more children in French so that they can also be bilingual. Of course, you work with many Francophone communities outside of Winnipeg. What resources could the federal government provide to bilingual municipalities so that they can reinforce their French language operations? Well, I know there are many programs that target bilingual municipalities where they've identified the need for services and resources. And I would say that once again, I'd like to underscore this issue of investment in education within departments and federal services that are offering these services. I salute the efforts of Ms. Hendricks, and I think that's a model that demonstrates that investment is required throughout a career. Of course, there's customer service and at the wicket, but people throughout the organization must have the ability to understand the language as well as the issues in the community. So for these municipalities, it can be all kinds of things, the RCMP, healthcare, justice, post office, etc. Thank you very much, Ms. Hendricks. We'll now go to the second round of questions. The first will be from the Conservative Party with Ms. Stephanie Kuzi. Please go ahead. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and to the witness. My husband is from Manitoba, from a Franco-Manitoban family. He has a grandmother from Belgium, another one from France. Our son has gone through immersion in Calgary. So having French throughout the country is very important. My mother's Francophone too. So my first question is for both of you. What is the future of French for the Francophonie in Manitoba, specifically in Ms. Cassie? In your opinion, what is the future of Franco-Manitobans? Well, thank you for the question and for sharing your roots and connections to Franco-Manitobans. I think that demonstrates the wealth of our community, and in that richness we see the future. We're all working very closely with the Franco-Métis community. We're building bridges for reconciliation between Francophones and Franco-Métis, and we've developed a community strategy plan that articulates our vision for the future. And this deals with all issues: education, early childhood, as we just mentioned, access to justice in French, healthcare in French, and of course, arts and culture. So to our mind, we want to continue to be able to live in French, not only in the city of Winnipeg, where we see a growth in immersion programs, and in my opinion, that is an opportunity to build bridges too, to ensure that immersion students don't see French only as something they have to do in school, but feel part of the Francophonie. Ms. Hendricks mentioned linguistic security, and to my mind, to ensure that those individuals whose families have decided to send their children to immersion, as you have done, madam, we don't want to lose them after grade 12. We want them to continue to be involved in the community. And like I do, we'll see the wealth of the language and continue to fight for our language rights. So I hope that it won't always be a matter of a demand that these rights will be recognized and respected. But this is wealth, not just in some places, but also in Beauséjour, Saint-Malo, Thompson, Sainte-Anne. There are many Francophone communities throughout our beautiful province, and we want to make sure that in 20 or 30 years, they will continue to identify as bilingual, and that population will be proud and able to live in French. Thank you very much, Ms. Casey. I'm very pleased to hear that attitude exists in Manitoba, same as it does in Calgary, that there are many parents that make the choice to send their children to French immersion in a French milieu. In your opinion, what are the greatest challenges for your organization right now, if you please? For us, it's the sustainability of our organizations. Many of them rely on funding that's project related, so it's very difficult when you keep having to apply for funding for a project rather than concentrate on our core mandate. That's certainly one issue. The other thing is the labor force. There's a lot of competition for Francophone talent, and as we heard today, with hybrid work, people can work from anywhere to work in Manitoba. We want to ensure that our community organizations are all right because they're in great competition when it comes to salaries. So we have to maintain that labor force. Thank you, Ms. Cassie. We'll now have Mr. Serré for the Liberals. 5 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Cassie, Ms. Hendricks. That will help us enrich our study. I just want to remind everyone of the study, as Ms. Cassie mentioned, when the Official Language Commissioner asked us to look at this. We look at senior officials and what we can do to stop the decline and improve the situation across the country, because it's quite clear that there's a lot of work left to do. You mentioned that you had some success in the past 2 years, but before that it wasn't that great. There were problems where the federal government was waiting to support certain official language aspects. When we talk about recruitment and retention, what do you see the federal government doing to help you? Certain tools and things that could help you. You said there's hybrid work. There are people in Regina. Are they French? Are those the work from your headquarters done in French or just in English? You have people working in a hybrid situation across the country, but what could be done to improve the situation for management positions? Since we are a Crown corporation, we have some independence. So when it comes to tools, we are inspired by the tools of the Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages. We use the tools that were developed to identify management positions and other positions that need to be bilingual. And when we make an offer of employment, we look at whether the candidates are bilingual, and if it's a bilingual designated position and their skills are not sufficient, we have some kind of arrangement or a requirement for them to have courses, and then with our budget we will support that employee to improve their French in the workplace. Now, you asked, are there Francophone communities in Regina? Yes, there are. We've recruited bilingual people. The person who is heading up our translation office is bilingual. Okay, but is the work done in your headquarters? Are there translation services during meetings? You said there were a few meetings, but the idea here is to, we'll have consultations to see whether there will be changes that need to be made. Do you have any ideas? Is there a concentration of Francophone professionals? Do we work in French in Regina? The percentage that we work on a daily basis is lower than Saint-Hyacinthe, obviously, because there's a bigger concentration of people that aren't bilingual in Regina. We have translation all over the country, but the team is concentrated in Regina. If we have teachers who can give classes, that's throughout Canada. So you're asking me, having translation services for all meetings, if I understand your question correctly, is that possible? Well, I'd say that the Kudo application is quite a good one, because then they can translate for you on site when the meeting takes place. So that's a service we do use. and we could certainly increase its use. But we concentrate first and foremost on making sure that employees who want to discuss things in French can have access to it. I appreciate the improvements you've made in the organization. Now, in a minute or less, you're trying to improve the vitality of communiques, and that's a great type of work. It's not just senior management. But do you have any help from the federal government to improve the situation of federal organizations in the province of Manitoba to make sure there is more French spoken in these federal organizations? Well, yes, of course, recruitment to attract bilingual talent, but we'll continue to invest in that talent throughout their career in the public service. So I can talk personally a bit. I worked in the federal government in different capacities for 25 years, and I did have access to training that helped me a great deal in improving this in a workplace context. Often people don't feel comfortable because there's this language insecurity. So investment to ensure that this training can continue would be one thing. With the University of St. Boniface, the Alliance Française, we have high-quality programs that members of the public service could access. Thank you, Mr. Serré. Now, for 2.5 minutes, we will listen to Mr. Beaulieu. You have the floor, Mr. Beaulieu. Thank you. So, my question would be for the Franco-Manitoban organization. We know there's been a decline in French that's significant. 4% of this population used to use French at home as its main language. Today it's 1.3%. So do you think that the bilingual, institutional bilingualism system works? Has that countered assimilation? Well, that's why we wanted modernization of the Official Languages Act to provide better tools and fight against this decline. Now it's a matter of making sure that this legislation contains policies that will ensure implementation. Now, for that, we think that one important element is services to the community offered by the federal government. And that's why we really want to talk about those investments. Now, would you say that federal public servants in Manitoba know enough French, or do enough of them speak French? I don't have the figures. Can francophones be served in French throughout the province? Not everywhere. There are departments with which we work more frequently, so certainly those, but if I was to speak to people in our community who are in Saint-Pierre-Joly, they would say that it's more difficult to access service in French. Quite often, language obligations for bilingual positions mean that they accept bilingual or unilingual English people under the condition that they take French courses. Don't you think that the knowledge of French should be required before a job is given rather than bet on training? That's a great question, Mr. Beaulieu, but your time is up. Madame Cassie, you can answer if you want in writing through our clerk. Ms. Ashton, our last question for 2.5 minutes as well. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Can you hear me? No. Okay. I'm sorry for the delay. Well, Quickly, my first question for Ms. Cassie is the matter of access to French language services. And we know that the reality is, I've talked about the justice system. We know that it's very important to be able to access the justice system in French in my province. However, we also know that no judge in Manitoba can hear a case in French, which is clearly unacceptable. That's not theory. That's the reality back home. And I know that it's important to address one aspect of Bill C-13, which could contribute to bilingualism of judges. But let's get back to Manitoba. We don't have any judges who can hear cases in French. Do you think Franco-Manitobans should be entitled to adequate French language legal services? Is there a role for the government to play in this? Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that question. Yes. Access to a good quality service in French, especially vital services like justice. We will ensure the training of bilingual lawyers, but we need judges too, and that can lead to incredibly long delays in important cases. So that's something that we have to work on an urgent basis, I'd say. Ms. Ashton, I'll give you a little more time, but please raise your microphone. 15 more seconds. Go ahead. So quickly, on the question of encouraging people to work for the federal government, we heard that an increase in the bilingual bonus from $800 to $3,000 would be important. Do you think that a bilingual bonus is important to encourage people to enter the public service and stay in it? Thank you for your question, Ms. Ashton. Ms. Cassie, unfortunately, I wish to thank both witnesses today. That was excellent, good interaction here, quick answers. You're very competent in your respective fields. If you can provide us with more information in writing, please do so through our clerk, who will provide this to all our members. Thank you. You were very well prepared. That was very interesting. We're going to suspend for a few minutes to go in camera. So thank you once again, dear guests. This was very pleasant. Thank you. Suspended.